Chapter 1191, Grasping One's Mentality. Friendliness? Upon hearing the World Gehrman Sparrow's question, Fours nearly doubted her ears. The image of Mr. X's head that was put together, leaving it covered in cracks, crevices, and blood, surfaced in her mind. Just as Fours was deliberating over her words, Audrey glanced at her and smiled at the World Gehrman Sparrow.
To let the Abraham family sense your friendliness, it isn't about what you do, but what Miss Magician writes in her letters.
That's right. Unless I appear directly in front of Miss Magician's teacher, his understanding of me will only be limited to the various rumors and things that Miss Magician tells him. As long as the story she tells is good enough, even if it doesn't fit the actual situation, it doesn't matter.
Klein suddenly realized that he had been splitting hairs on the question. Fours was somewhat enlightened by Miss Justice's words, but she didn't fully understand it. After looking at the Hermit, the Star, and company, Justice Audrey said to Fours,
You need to convey Mr. World's friendliness to your teacher. For this, you can fabricate some stories and not tell him the truth.
Then what should I say?
Fours asked for advice. This wasn't because she wasn't good at making up stories. On the contrary, this was what she was most adept at. However, the problem was that writing a novel that was well received was different from a story that could convince people. If she could get a senior psychologist's advice on the latter, it would undoubtedly be easier. Audrey had already thought of the details of the letter before she opened her mouth. She replied unhurriedly.
It's obvious that your teacher has already noticed that you've rapidly advanced, and because of Mr. X's death and all sorts of sensitive issues, he has a certain level of doubt and vigilance regarding the Beyonder circles that you've participated in.
Yes.
Fours nodded indiscernibly in agreement with Miss Audrey's judgment. If her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham, was careless, he wouldn't have been able to survive to this day. He would have long been caught by the Aurora Order, or died in the hands of other powers who were interested in the Abraham family.
In such a situation, he will still maintain contact with you. He will teach you knowledge, give you formulas, and provide you with ingredients. This shows that, on the one hand, he acknowledges your character and morals, and on the other hand, he will also have a certain level of anticipation for you to obtain important information from the mysterious and dangerous Beyonder circle, as well as you becoming a Sequence 4 demigod. This is the mentality we want to exploit.
Audrey originally wanted to use the more neutral term, grasp, instead of exploit, but after pausing for a moment, she chose to face herself directly and face the essence of the matter. With Fours listening attentively, and Judgment, the Star, and the Hermit looking forward to what she had left to say, Audrey pursed her lips and said,
When you return, you can write to him and tell him that you have already become a traveler. It will make him happy for your growth, and also be surprised by such an exaggerated advancement speed. Then you can answer the question he asked previously, saying that the gentleman who was seeking to purchase the Worm of Star had mentioned something, that the ancient curse in the Abraham family seems to come from a secret existence known as Mr. Door. This is a question that your teacher has never told you about, but is definitely concerned about. Without a doubt, he will feel fear towards the gentleman who seems to know that you're related to the Abraham family. He will want to avoid you, but he will definitely yearn to know more. He will then try to find out what secret lies behind the curse that has plagued generations of Abrahams, one that he has no solution to. At the same time, a letter exchange isn't a direct meeting. It will give him a certain sense of security. He might change his residence, change his identity, and use a more roundabout way to receive the letter, but there is a high chance that he will not sever the connection. Maintain this connection. Step by step, reveal something more valuable. You will awaken your teacher's desire and use it to portray an image of Mr. World so that your teacher can experience some form of friendliness.
At this point, Audrey stopped and looked at the World Gehrman Sparrow once again. She could roughly tell that Mr. World's goodwill towards the Abraham family was because he had a request, but as for the specific request, she wasn't a clairvoyant, nor had she read Gehrman Sparrow's mind. Naturally, she couldn't guess it, nor could she continue explaining. Klein nodded and said with a hoarse smile,
After we establish this kind of indirect connection, I might ask your teacher for a transaction. and used the promise of breaking the curse to exchange for certain items of value.
Through demoness Trissy, he had already grasped the solution to the Abraham family's curse. However, he didn't plan on exchanging it for the Planeswalker potion formula or a Grade 0 sealed artifact. On the one hand, the difference in value was too great, making him feel guilty. On the other hand, he didn't want to bring a dangerous existence like Mr. Door back into the real world. It was being irresponsible to himself and the innocent. He was thinking of another way to make the curse of the Abraham family disappear to a certain extent. In other words, it might still exist, but it wouldn't affect the normal lives of the Abraham family and provide a certain range of improvements.
Is that so? Mid to high sequence beyonders in the mind domain are really impressive. She can make people follow her arrangements without realizing it. Compared to when we first met, Miss Justice has seemed to undergo a complete metamorphosis. It makes people fear and respect her.
Force glanced at Shio and seemed to read the same poignant thoughts from her eyes. After some thought, she mustered her courage and said to the world Gehrman Sparrow,
What if my teacher rejects your request?
Did you think I would murder for property?
Klein lampooned in Chinese. He scoffed and said,
Don't worry, I won't harm him. I won't use any methods that will force him.
Phew. Although Mr. World is a little scary, he's still a man of his word.
Force slowly nodded and said,
I'll write a letter to my teacher according to Miss Justice's suggestion.
Klein nodded slightly and surveyed the area.
You can begin discussing the hunt.
Galilea took control and said,
The biggest problem with this operation is finding the Saint of Secrets Bodis.
Force immediately recalled how she had encountered him and raised her hand.
If I can borrow that powerful sealed artifact from my teacher, then I can bring it with me. I can often wander around Backland and use the convergence of Beyonder characteristics to attract Bodis to a nearby location. This might attract other demigods of the Apprentice Pathway, or the leader of the Secret Order, Zaratul, or blasphemer Amon.
The more Force spoke, the lower her voice became. She felt that this method was too dangerous. She didn't know what would happen to the other members who participated in the operation if Zaratul and Amon really appeared, but as bait, it was without a doubt that she would fail to escape. Cathleya nodded and said thoughtfully,
If it's only a Grade 1 sealed artifact of the Apprentice Pathway, the law of convergence of Beyonder characteristics shouldn't be that attractive to neighboring pathways. The range will be limited to the demigods of the Apprentice Pathway. And from what I know, there aren't many of them. In fact, it can be said that there are very few of them. Most of them exist in the form of a characteristic or sealed artifact.
I suddenly do not wish to become a Sequence 4.
Force's eyelids twitched when she heard that. Cattleya cast her gaze at the world Gehrman Sparrow.
Let's not discuss the problem of whether there are any Grade 1 sealed artifacts of the Apprentice Pathway. If we want to let the Saint of Secrets and Miss Magician bump into each other, the prerequisite is that he is also in Backland. He mustn't be that cautious and often goes out.
Upon hearing this, Leonard said from the angle of a professional official Beyonder,
It's actually not difficult. As a demigod of the Apprentice Pathway, Bodis is definitely in charge of dealing with accidents among the upper echelons of the Aurora Order. He has sufficient mobility to aid the other members in different places. Hehe, this is a term that appeared after the steam engine and the airship were invented. As long as you can create some matters against the Aurora Order in Backlund, he has a high chance of showing up.
As he spoke, Leonard glanced at Klein. Based on what he knew, in the chaotic battle outside Biome City caused by Gehrman Sparrow, the Saint of Secrets had appeared and picked up a glove.
This is a solution.
Audrey and company nodded. At this moment, the world suddenly said,
Let me remind you that the Aurora Order is an organization that worships a true God. Once you take action against them and secretly target their upper echelons, the true creator might be able to foresee this and give them a warning.
That can happen? Audrey's eyes widened slightly as she observed Cattleya, Leonard, and company. She realized that they were equally astonished. This was something that they had never considered before. It wasn't that they weren't smart enough, but that they had never participated in such matters that involved high-level existences before. Or rather, even if they were involved, they weren't aware of it.
Then what should we do?
Force couldn't help but ask. Klein replied in a suggestive tone,
By not targeting the Aurora Order directly, we can use a milder approach to fish out the Saint of Secrets Bodis.
Chapter 1192, Each Serving Their Duty.
A milder approach.
The hermit Cattleya, who lacked experience only on high-level matters, instantly had a new idea and probed,
Don't let Miss Magician participate in the various Beyonder gatherings in Backland, accidentally revealing that she's related to the Abraham family, attracting the attention of the Aurora Order?
Seeing no objection from the World Gehrman Sparrow, Cattleya thought as she looked to the other side.
How we can make this matter appear reasonable without arousing suspicion, how to design the steps and procedures needed to expose herself, and how to lay the foundations at each one of the gatherings. These might require your help, Miss Justice.
From her point of view, only a manipulator who could accurately grasp the various mentalities of the different people at the gathering could allow the scheme to appear natural and reasonable, without leaving a trace.
All right.
Audrey nodded solemnly, feeling somewhat excited. She then added,
Although I've never done anything similar before, I will try my best to make everything seem reasonable.
Why do I suddenly feel a little afraid? Why do I feel like we are all inexperienced people? Apart from Mr. World, who can't directly participate, Ma'am Hermit might be very experienced in other aspects, but she shouldn't have been involved in such hunting before. This isn't a game. It's a cruel act that can kill someone if we aren't careful.
Fours trembled when she heard this. She had a deep suspicion of the experience of most of the members. This included herself. However, when she thought of how Miss Justice and Ma'am Hermit were already Sequence 4 demigods, and that she and the Star were at Sequence 5, she felt that this wasn't too serious of a problem. After all, every powerhouse had accumulated their experiences over time from nothing. Furthermore, they still had the World Gehrman Sparrow, the strongest hunter over the 5 seas.
Reasonable. Scheme. Manipulation.
Listening to the conversation between Ma'am Hermit and Miss Justice, Klein subconsciously extracted the keywords. This reminded him of how he had used 008 and the experience of playing out situations that had been arranged by 008. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly.
It's no wonder the Spectator's Sequence 1 is called Author. This is indeed a very reasonable development, but it can change from a guidance to being forced.
There's no need to rush yourself to make the arrangements in detail. Go back and think it over carefully. Yes, at the same time, we need to combine the feedback from the scene to make adjustments.
Cattleya nodded in thought as she immediately had a new idea.
When Miss Magician participates in the Beyonder gatherings, it's best you hide in the vicinity. Use your control of the sea of collective subconscious to monitor every participant's thoughts and accurately grasp the feedback.
Would 13 virtual personas be enough? There should be more than 13 members at a Beyonder gathering. I can switch to using monitoring to select a target to focus on.
Audrey quickly analyzed the feasibility of the suggestion and tersely acknowledged.
That wouldn't be an issue.
To her, this was also a form of training. At the same time, it was also a form of acting. She didn't directly use her Beyonder powers to affect the target, but instead used her precise understanding of the target's mental state to manipulate them by using words, behavior, actions, and a script. Seeing that there was no problem on Miss Justice's side, the hermit Cattleya looked at the magician.
In order to prevent a surprise attack and to better grasp your surroundings, I need to plant something on you.
What is it?
Fours asked warily. Cattleya glanced at the world at the bottom end of the long, mottled table. After receiving the permission of Mr. Fool's Blessed, she raised her hand and pressed it between her brows. A pair of transparent eyes appeared in front of her, ones that were without eyelashes, looking cold and heartless.
This is the eye of mystery prying. After becoming a mysticologist, I can place it on someone else's body. Whatever it sees, it will be what I see. Furthermore, once it enters a concealed state, it will be very difficult to be discovered through other means.
Catalea gave a simple introduction. Upon seeing this scene, Klein leaned back slightly and sighed inwardly. When he first grasped spirit vision, he had seen something similar behind old Neil. If he had the mysticism knowledge he had now back then, he would have detected the problem earlier. Perhaps things would have developed differently.
If this strange eye were to be planted on me, wouldn't I be watched by Ma'am Hermit when I go to the bathroom?
Fors secretly drew a cold gasp as she hesitantly asked,
Can we plant it before each gathering?
If we make frequent contact with each other, we'll be easily discovered. Besides, the Saint of Secrets wouldn't only appear at times you choose.
Catalea nudged the heavy glasses on her nose bridge and explained,
Don't worry, I won't look at things I shouldn't see.
It was a lesson learned through blood. Fors fell silent for a few seconds before she slowly exhaled.
All right then.
Catalea nodded slightly and continued.
After discovering clues to the Abraham family, the Aurora Order will definitely do a certain amount of investigation. And for safety, so as to prevent any accidents from happening, they will definitely send out someone with a certain level of confidence. Among them, the Saint of Secrets Bodis is undoubtedly the person who is most interested in the matter regarding the Abraham family. In addition, Backlund isn't suitable for a King of Angels main body to be active in, so the probability of him appearing is the highest.
At this moment, the star Leonard, who was leaning against the back of his chair, raised his hand and said,
Not necessarily. According to the information we have gathered, the Aurora Order has other high-ranking members in Backlund, St. Tenebris. After Mr. A disappeared, he came forward to organize certain matters. When the time comes, the person responsible for tracking the clues to the Abraham family might very well be him, not the Saint of Secrets. After all, this is his diocese.
The demigod I met when I assassinated Mr. X was St. Tenebris?
Klein nodded in enlightenment without bringing any attention to himself. Catalea was already prepared for this. Without any hesitation, she said to the star,
This might require your help. In the near future, you should investigate more cases involving the Aurora Order and strike at them more. This way, it will be inconvenient for them to move around. After discovering clues about the Abraham family, they might very likely seek reinforcements, getting, yes, the more mobile and more concealed Saint of Secrets to be responsible for it.
Leonard thought of his recent mission list and nodded slightly.
Sure.
As the captain of a Red Gloves team, he had the right to do so.
The only problem is, could this be predicted by the true creator?
After Leonard agreed, he turned to look at Klein. After some thought, Klein pointed out indirectly,
You are similarly under the gaze of a deity.
Leonard retracted his gaze as though he had gained some understanding. He said to the hermit Catalea,
I have no further questions.
The hermit Catalea raised her glasses and cast her gaze towards judgment.
We will try our best to limit the Beyonder circles that Miss Magician will be involved in to East Borough and the Backlund Bridge area. These should be places you are familiar with. You have to constantly be aware of any abnormalities. Inform me immediately about the surroundings of the gathering's location.
All right.
Although Shio was disappointed that she was involved in the periphery matters, she knew very well that, with her strength, she could only do so much. At that moment, Catalea thought for a moment before saying,
You are a judge. When the time comes, you might need to do some area of effect prohibition. This might not be effective against the Saint of Secrets, Bodis, but it should be able to cause some interference, don't doubt it. As support, mid-sequence Beyonders can similarly influence a saint to a certain extent.
All of this is under the premise of a demigod resisting a demigod, while all I provide is support.
The education Zio had received since she was young and the addition of the knowledge she learned from MI9 now put an emphasis on cooperation. It was very easy to understand what Ma'am Hermit was saying. At this point, the plan had just started taking form. The next step was to adjust it bit by bit through on-the-ground feedback. Fors heaved a sigh of relief when she suddenly thought of something. She hurriedly said,
Previously, Mr. World mentioned that Bartis might have a Grade 0 sealed artifact. How should we deal with it?
Frankly speaking, she didn't have a direct impression of how terrifying a Grade 0 sealed artifact was. This was because she had never encountered one before and had never seen anyone encounter it before. However, she had experienced the Grade 1 sealed artifacts that Gehrman Sparrow had borrowed from Mr. Fool. She knew how terrifying it was, and with a Grade 0 sealed artifact being one grade higher than a Grade 1 sealed artifact, it was obvious how potent one was. In the rumors that Fors had heard, some Grade 0 sealed artifacts could even destroy Backland, or even the world, Catalea said after a few seconds of silence.
On the one hand, through Miss Justice's grasp of the minds of the people around you, she will be able to find traces of possible existences. On the other hand, with Miss Judgment's understanding of the various anomalies in the region and combining it with divination, we will be able to determine ahead of time if there are any sealed artifacts. If we can't get any feedback from all of this, and if the Saint of Secrets has a Grade 0 sealed artifact with him, you don't have to be too afraid. He won't kill you immediately. He will definitely try to gain control of you and interrogate you at a safe place. We have enough time and opportunities to separate him from the sealed artifact. Remember, a sealed artifact that a Beyonder possesses isn't completely a part of his strength. During this process, didn't you record some high-level Beyonder powers? If the situation is critical, don't hold back and try your best to escape.
Sounds like you're not very confident either.
Fors's face suddenly turned pale as she forced a smile.
I'll try my best.
At this moment, the World Gehrman Sparrow took the initiative to speak.
In times of necessity, pray to Mr. Fool. I will also ask him to provide his protection in advance and provide some revelations.
As this operation wouldn't pose a threat to Klein's actual body regardless of the development, and it might involve a Grade 0 sealed artifact, he could only gain some revelations from his initial control of Sapphira Castle. That's good. Fors, Gio, and company heaved a sigh of relief. When the private gathering was coming to an end, Klein glanced at Catalea and said,
It looks like there's no way to end the operation before New Year. I'll provide you with the advance payment.
He then condensed some of mysticism knowledge he had never mentioned into a pale white brilliance and pushed it to the hermit. Chapter 1193, Heading East. Dark Angel Sasrir might very well be the negative personality that's expelled from the ancient sun god. Mr. Dor was once the most powerful king of angels. The Abraham family also possesses at least 2 Grade 0 sealed artifacts that's at the level of an angel of the apprentice pathway. The underlying rules of this world are chaos and madness. Pieces of mysticism knowledge resonated in Catalea's mind, causing her to feel weighed down in addition to her shock. If it wasn't for the Tarot Club, Mr. Fool's protection, and the World Gehrman Sparrow's help, she believed that it wouldn't be easy for her to obtain such knowledge. She definitely had to take a tremendous risk in exchange. If she wasn't careful, she would attract the attention of certain high-level existences, or be embroiled in madness and pain. Catalea opened her eyes and thanked him sincerely.
Thank you for your advance payment. This will greatly help me digest the potion.
According to her original plan, she believed that she would be able to gain some mysticism knowledge after meeting Queen Mystic. With Gehrman Sparrow's current advance payment, her mysticologist potion would most likely be completely digested. Unfortunately, a few days before she arrived in Backland, Queen Mystic Bernadette had left the city to trace a lead. This left Catalea extremely disappointed. Upon hearing Ma'am Hermit's words, Klein, who was pretending to be the world, laughed hoarsely.
A price is exacted for what's bestowed.
As his voice echoed, he nodded at the 2 ladies, Justice and the Magician, indicating that he was also directing those words at them. After the private gathering ended and the members left Sapphira Castle one by one, Klein stood up and walked back to the seat of honor from the bottom end of the long, mottled table to the seat belonging to the Fool. He leaned back into his chair and propped his elbow on the armrest as the void beside him rippled and formed halos. These were prayer lights that came from puppets controlled by a historical projection that Klein had summoned. They had existed before the gathering, but the corresponding area had been hidden from the rest, so no one could sense it. It was only now restored to normal. He cast his gaze at the rippling light and expanded his vision into the distance. In the real world, a dark mountain stood erect. There was a mountain hole at the mountainside that extended downwards. This was once a place that hid many humans who had survived the cataclysm, but they were later turned into dark demonic Wolf Kotar's marionettes. During this period of time, Klein kept tracing the clues and found 3 spots where the dark demonic wolf had hidden himself. However, Klein didn't gain much from them. The reason was simple. Just like now, there was a rock in the cave. On it sat a young man wearing a classic black robe, a pointed hat, a broad forehead, and a thin face, Aemon. This angel of time seemed to sense the gaze from Sapphira Castle as he raised his head and adjusted his crystal monocle. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Klein retracted his gaze, his facial muscles twitching slightly as he muttered,
What a haunting presence. It's not like this fellow doesn't understand the dark demonic wolf's past. Is there a need for him to destroy all the clues I need? Furthermore, he only comes slightly earlier than me every single time.
If it wasn't because he wasn't Aemon's match, he really wanted to hang him up and beat him. Phew! Klein exhaled and immediately returned to the real world. He wore a black top hat and carried a dim yellow lantern. He dispelled his maintaining of the historical projection, and, without looking back, he left the mountain and ventured deep into the silent wilderness. There was no hesitation in his footsteps, as he had already obtained detailed information about the dark demonic wolf, Kotar, from the Evernight goddess. He was well aware of the character, styles, and habits of the god of wishes. The reason why he was still searching for the dark demonic wolf's past was mainly because he wanted to verify the information. After all, the East Continent had been in the forsaken land of the gods for more than 2,000 years. The dark demonic wolf had escaped the Evernight goddess's attention for a sufficiently long period of time, so it was very likely that some abnormalities and changes in character would occur. If he made a plan following the intelligence provided by the Evernight goddess, there was a small chance that he would make the mistake of launching a surgical strike using an outdated map. Klein couldn't help but lampoon inwardly.
Under the tremendous pressure from the true creator and Aemon, the chances of the dark demonic wolf transforming isn't low. Perhaps it has even turned abnormal or half-mad because of the excess stress.
The words dark demonic wolf could actually be switched to Klein Moretti or Jo Mingrui ad verbatim. It just needed to be said in future tense. The other reason for his persistence in pursuing the dark demonic wolf's past was that he was trying to fool Aemon, making it difficult for him to guess that he had already grasped the key information. Of course, this might not be able to deceive the god of deceit. His main goal was to obtain a victory of the mind, so as to adjust his mental state that was overly stressed. This allowed him to reduce the frequency at which he sought Miss Justice's treatment. The mas la barbeau, as he thought about it.
Well, from the looks of it, the dark demonic wolf still maintains its clarity and rationality in the late Second Epoch. It wasn't as violent as when it first fused with other, beyonder characteristics, bloodthirsty, crazy. His most important personality appears to not have changed, ever so suspicious. He doesn't even trust his own marionettes. Once he decides to migrate, he would leave all the marionettes that he had before and sever all connections. Also, the dark demonic wolf seems to have migrated from the east over here.
Klein came to an abrupt stop. Under the darkness that was void of stars and the crimson moon, he cast his gaze in a particular direction by relying on his spiritual intuition. His expression gradually turned solemn as he raised his right hand and pressed on his silk top hat. Then he adjusted the direction he was heading in and walked towards where his eyes were trained at. That was the east. In the endless darkness, the lantern in his hand cast a lonely shadow. His trench coat was almost the same color as the distant night as his footsteps quickened. Backland, Empress Borough, inside the Hall family's luxurious mansion. Audrey sat in front of the dressing table and began to seriously consider how to release the bait in a seemingly reasonable fashion. During this process, she suddenly thought of something. That was that if she wanted to go near a Beyonder gathering and monitor the thoughts of the participants, there was a lack of quick and efficient methods. As a Sequence 4 demigod, she neither could fly nor teleport. She also couldn't use the flames to jump secretly. It would be fine if it was late at night, but if she wanted to use dreams as a springboard, she could only rely on her feet during the day and evening. As she pondered about the matter,
Oh, actually, my speed isn't slow, but if I were to run faster than a steam train, I would definitely attract attention. There are so many powerhouses in Backland, so there's no lack of existences that can see through my psychological invisibility. Similarly, in my dragon form, I can fly, but that's just too eye-catching. Currently, I can only let my consciousness and spirit body enter the sea of collective subconscious, while I'm unable to bring my body in.
Audrey could only consider purchasing sealed artifacts or mystical items that had traveling powers while deciding to travel through dreams if there were dreams. Otherwise, she could only rely on walking, carriages, or the metro.
What a simple demigod. It's no wonder the full name is half human, half god. Those terrifying Beyonder powers are the godly side of things, while these are the human side of things.
Audrey gave a self-deprecating laugh and reined in her thoughts. Backland, Hillstonborough. Sitting beside the fireplace, Forbes opened a book that was propped on her thigh as a platform for her to write. Holding a pen in her hand, she stared at the horizontal lines on the paper and the tarot cards that were scattered on the ground for a long time. Shio walked over, crouched down, and looked up into Forbes' eyes.
What's wrong? You don't want to lie to your teacher? No, everything you write will be the truth. You don't want to set up your teacher?
Forbes shook her head.
No, it's not because of this. Emaf. I do feel a little guilty, but I know that this is a good thing for the Abraham family. I'm just hesitating. I keep feeling that our destinies will change after writing this letter.
Shio was a little stunned when she heard that. She didn't quite understand what her good friend meant. Forbes let out a sigh and said,
The battles from the past and now were actually not that dangerous for us. We had the ability to avoid it and obtain the corresponding resources to continue our peaceful lives. Therefore, my feelings for them don't run deep. We're like people standing beside a torrent. We could have watched everything go by safely, but after writing this letter, we might perhaps be swept into the torrent.
Shio listened quietly. She opened her mouth and pursed her lips.
If not for this, do you think we can avoid the torrent of fate?
As she spoke, she picked up a tarot card from the ground. The surface of the card depicted an angel blowing a trumpet and the deceased. Judgment card. Forbes looked at the deck of tarot cards for a while before closing her eyes. She pulled her hair back and smiled.
I understand. This is an inevitable destiny.
After praying to Mr. Fool and after obtaining the magician card, it was an unavoidable destiny. The fountain pen, in Forbes' hand, finally landed on the letter. Pritz Harbor. Dorian Gray Abraham, who had long left the Fishermen's Association and changed his identity, tore open the letter sent by his student. As he quickly browsed through it, his expression went from shock, joy, and confusion to horror. Bang! Dorian threw away the letter in his hand and knocked down the table in front of him. It was like a monster hiding on that piece of paper with a curse. He retreated to another corner, pulled open the drawer, and took out some items. Then he rushed to the door and prepared to leave. When his right hand touched the brass doorknob, Dorian's actions suddenly slowed down and finally stopped. He slowly turned around and cast his gaze at the letter on the ground. There was a complicated look in his eyes. After a few seconds, Dorian Gray Abraham slowly walked towards the letter. He walked with hesitation, feeling the dilemma and struggles, but he didn't stop. It was as if he had been seduced by the devil. Chapter 1194. A Lion's Hunt of a Rabbit. Finally, Dorian stopped beside the letter. He bent down and reached out his right hand. His fingers trembled as he grabbed the edge of the paper and picked it up. This time, Dorian was very careful. He began reading each word, one after another from the very beginning. Sometimes he was enlightened, sometimes confused, sometimes puzzled, and sometimes in pain. The letter Force had sent wasn't long. He only used 3 minutes to read it twice before he fell into a long silence. The sunlight shined through the window and landed on the toppled table. Dorian Gray Abraham's lips suddenly quivered, but he ultimately didn't make a sound. Separated by a piece of paper, his right thumb and index finger quickly rubbed against each other and ignited the letter with a scarlet flame. After doing all of this, Dorian packed his belongings, put on his disguise, changed his clothes, and left the rented apartment. Using the identity he had previously prepared, he went to another place. After settling down, he sat beside the desk and stared at the brass ornament, seemingly deep in thought. The area became darker and darker as the sunlight weakened. Dorian's eyelids twitched as he slowly sighed. Boo knew. He then unfolded the piece of paper and picked up the fountain pen. As he pondered, he wrote, "I'm very happy to see you digesting the scribe potion in a few months. This means that you might really become a demigod. These are the key points to take note of while acting as a traveler, at least the ones that I know of. However, you have to remember that everyone's personality is different. There will always be some differences in acting in real life, so you can't copy blindly. This doesn't mean that the acting principles of others are wrong, but that it might lead to a huge conflict in your heart, affecting your mental state. Sometimes you can make appropriate adjustments to slow down the speed at which the potion is being digested, but it will only be beneficial to you. You have to remember, acting is a tool, not something to lord over you. I look forward to the day you completely digest the traveler potion. I will prepare the corresponding ingredients and a present for you. I'm very interested in the matter of the Abraham family's curse mentioned by that gentleman. I think you should have noticed long ago that I have done a certain degree of research on such matters. Otherwise, you wouldn't always ask me about such matters. I hope you can continue to learn about this matter at a deeper level. Malamikamasys Taluris." After writing the reply, Dorian Gray Abraham closed his eyes and quickly folded the paper. January 1351, Backlund's new year was much bleaker than before. In a basement in West Borough, there were a few candles flickering with yellow flames, illuminating the surrounding altars, chairs, and round tables. At the edge of the light, in a place that was extremely dark, a figure appeared indistinct. At times it would sway, sometimes stretching into a thin entity that didn't have any thickness. It was like a shadow that came alive. Suddenly, the figure said in a deep voice,
"You arrived earlier than I expected."
Beside the candle, a figure quickly appeared in the spot illuminated the greatest by the light. It was a man dressed in a mysterious black robe. His brown hair was slightly curled, and his dark, deep eyes seemed to contain countless objects. He was none other than one of the 5 saints of the Aurora Order, the Saint of Secrets, Botus. Botus smiled and said,
"To me, distance is not a problem."
He pulled a chair and sat down before saying to the long and narrow shadow,
"Have you investigated thoroughly? Did you find anything unusual?"
The shadow that nearly slinked into the shadows answered in a low voice.
"There aren't any problems."
At the confirmation of the question, Botus instinctively had doubts.
"Really? Kisma, could this be a trap?"
The Aurora Order's Saint Tenebris Kisma slowly shook his head and said,
"The target is very careful. It's definitely not a case of deliberate exposure. If she wasn't seeking to purchase an ancient wraith's cursed item, we wouldn't have been able to sense that she might be related to the Abraham family."
Saint of Secrets Botus seemed to be in thought as he said,
"An ancient wraith's cursed item. This is one of the main ingredients of scribe. I remember that the Abraham family does have a spare Asmon's brain. They aren't willing to directly provide a scribe beyond her characteristic, hoping to carry out some tests. It's indeed the style of the Abraham family. To put it simply, they don't have enough trust in others."
Saint Tenebris Kisma didn't echo Botus's words as he continued,
"Even if she was seeking to purchase the main ingredients of the scribe potion, we wouldn't have noticed any problems. After all, not every believer knows the corresponding mysticism knowledge, but she even mentioned some questions related to Apprentice and the Abrahams. She was really cautious in this aspect. The circle of Beyonders from which she sought to purchase materials from and the one she asked questions weren't the same. Different matters were left to different circles. Furthermore, at times she would hire other participants to help her make requests. If it weren't for the fact that we have our people in those few circles and were able to combine the intelligence, we wouldn't have noticed her.
Saint of Secrets Bodis nodded slightly and asked,
Why didn't you just take action? You even came to me?
In the shadows, the darkness stirred and replied slowly,
The situation in Backland is getting more and more tense. The Nighthawks, the mandated Punishers, and the machinery hive mind are carpet sweeping the area, one spot after another. We're being watched very closely. If I were to handle this matter, it would be fine if there weren't any accidents. However, if an accident were to happen, I might not be able to escape due to not having grazed a secret sorcerer. Besides, aren't you the one who is most interested in the Abraham family?
Bodis chuckled and said,
I'm not interested in them at all. I just want them to all die. To ensure my own safety, the most important thing is to nip revenge in the bud. This is the philosophy I abide by.
As he spoke, the Saint of Secrets took out a crystal ball from his black robe's pocket. The crystal ball was neither clear nor translucent, as if it had been injected with the dark night. As he touched it with his palm, his lips quivered. This strange crystal ball suffused a resplendent glow. They were like stars that slowly spun, forming a complicated scene.
It's still acceptable.
Bodis looked at the crystal ball in his right hand and nodded gently. He then looked at the ghostly shadow.
Give me the details.
When he learned that there would be a Beyonder gathering in a particular circle tonight, with the target possibly appearing, the Saint of Secrets Bodis stood up and said to Saint Tenebris Kisma,
I need to make some preparations.
As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand opened, and with a gentle lift, his fingers closed. The region he was in immediately warped and vanished. The candles, flames, round table, and chairs that were originally located here vanished, leaving behind only the tiles and ceiling. After a while, the shadows moved and everything returned to normal. Nothing happened to Saint of Secrets Bodis, but Saint Tenebris's figure appeared out of the darkness. He looked at Bodis and said in a deep voice,
Your caution has exceeded the necessary limits.
Bodis replied with a smile.
But this isn't a bad thing. I hope that I can resolve the problem without anyone noticing. You can follow me. You can hide in the shadows as my support. You will not directly appear, and you will leave immediately once you discover anything amiss.
Saint Tenebris Kisma slowly walked out of the shadows.
All right.
He looked young and handsome with outstanding facial features, but his face seemed to be covered with a faint curtain of darkness. After coming close to Bodis, there were a series of illusory chewing sounds that came from nowhere. The chewing sounds and the sound of digesting could be heard, as well as undisguised evil and hunger. This made the demigod shudder involuntarily. Saint Tenebris's eyes froze for a second as he cast a shocked and surprised look at Bodis's face. The corners of Bodis's mouth curled up as he revealed a rather cruel smile. A few seconds later, one of them used teleportation, and the other merged into the shadows and left the house. In an apartment that had been in disrepair for years, in the area intersecting Backland's East Borough and the Bridge area, there were a few rooms on the first floor of a cheap motel that had their rooms connected. When Bodis walked out from the spirit world, the Beyonder gathering was only to be held 2 to 3 hours later. No one had arrived yet. He looked around and took in the long tables that were arranged messily. After observing the environment, he walked to a corner with his right hand pulling the curtain. The region was then enveloped by a shadow, distorting before vanishing. This was because there wasn't anything there to begin with. There was no objective measure, so no one would have discovered that there was a space missing. They would only feel that the distance between the walls and themselves was a little closer, but upon closer inspection, everything was normal. This was the space concealment power of a secret sorcerer. They could use this ability to split a place into two and conceal part of it. One had to use a specific door to enter. At that moment, in the area that had been divided and hidden, the room existed normally. There were floor tiles, a ceiling, and a cockroach crawling across the ground. The cockroach rushed to the boundary and was blocked by the endless darkness. After Saint of Secrets Botus surveyed the area, his gaze paused at a transparent vortex in midair. This was the door. Every hidden space would definitely have a door. After some thought, Botus reached into the black robe's pocket, took out a mirror, and inserted it into the door. The mirror twisted and quickly reflected the scene in the outside world. There were chairs and long tables randomly strewn around. The place was empty. In this way, Botus used this mirror to monitor the Beyonder Gathering's venue. Seconds changed to minutes as the Beyonders dressed in various disguises arrived. One of the hooded figures habitually chose a corner near the window. She took out a palm-sized notebook and casually flipped through a few pages, as though she was revising the main points of her questions or checking if she was fully prepared. And behind her, to the side, there was an ordinary mirror embedded in the wall. Chapter 1195, Grade 0. In the region that had been concealed, the Saint of Secrets, Botus, narrowed his eyes slightly as he recognized Lemano's travels. This made him no longer have any doubts about the intel provided by Saint Tenebrous Kisma. He recognized this notebook and knew that it was a mystical item that the Abraham family placed great importance on. It was one of the most powerful items below the high sequences, and the negative effects were negligible. Botus muttered inwardly as his expression gradually turned grim, showing hints of a cruel fervor.
Back when I was a mid-sequence Beyonder, I had yearned for this notebook so much. In the end, the Abraham family was wary of me and didn't place any importance on my needs at all. Now, have they learned their lesson? This woman shouldn't be a descendant of the Abraham family. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gone around searching for the cursed item of an ancient wraith.
After observing his surroundings for a while, he carefully reached into his black robe's pocket. The pocket seemed to contain a vast space, as Saint of Secrets Botus dragged out a 3-layered jewelry box from within. This jewelry box wasn't tiny, making it difficult to hold it with one hand. It was mainly silver-black in color, and its surface was covered with exquisite decorations. There were rubies, emeralds, sapphires, and diamonds embedded in it, making it look rather luxurious. As he held the jewelry box in his hands, there was a hint of panic and fear in his expression. It was as if he was facing the abyss or listening to an evil god's ravings. The gathering continued as usual. Fours put away Lemano's travels and focused on listening to the participants, as though she was seeking some answers. During this process, she would occasionally ask questions, using gold pounds and spiritual materials as payment. However, she didn't receive any effective answers. Gradually, the Beyonder gathering came to an end. The host arranged for the different participants to leave from different exits. Soon, only Fours and a few other Beyonders were left in the room. After receiving the signal of the host, Fours stood up and resisted the urge to stretch herself as she walked towards the side door. At this moment, she realized that her body had stiffened. Her head could barely turn, but it felt like she was a toy that had its torsion spring wound up. From the corner of her eye, she saw that the grayish-white walls had turned silvery black in an instant. They were covered in granules, as though they were made of metal. The remaining participants and the host had their skin lose the luster that it should have possessed. Their eyes were dull, their movements mechanical, as though they were large dolls. In the concealed area, Botus had opened the jewelry box at some point in time. The interior of its top layer wasn't exquisite enough, but it had completely restored the scene of the room. In the room, there were chairs and long tables scattered haphazardly. There were a few palm-sized puppets sitting or standing, as though they were trying to simulate reality. Among these people, the person standing was wearing a hooded robe. The shape of her chin was beautiful, and her lips were plump and red. It was none other than Fours. She and the remaining Beyonders, together with the gathering's host, had silently become toys. They had been taken into the highest layer of the jewelry box. The room that connected in the external world was only left with grayish-white walls, nothing else. The corners of Botis's lips curled up bit by bit. With his right hand, he closed the lid of the jewelry box. In just a single breath, he had magically controlled his target. This silver-black, three-layered jewelry box was the Grade 0 sealed artifact that he had snatched from the Abraham family. As it had never been obtained by the Orthodox churches, nor was it ever deeply understood, it didn't have a corresponding number. According to what Botis knew, this jewelry box originated from an Abraham family angel from the 4th epoch. He enjoyed roaming the cosmos and heading to different places in the vast universe. However, once, when he returned to his family to rest, he died silently in his palace. His face was filled with fear, and his expression was twisted, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. A true mythical creature, one that could be considered a subsidiary god in the 2nd epoch, had actually died silently without causing a stir. The death was extremely bizarre. The Beyonder characteristic he left behind, combined with his corpse, forming the jewelry box that was quite different from the other kind of sealed artifacts. And back then, Mr. Door, Bethel Abraham, not only didn't attempt to shatter it and restore it to a pure Beyonder characteristic, he had even given it a rather strange name, Box of the Great Old Ones. The first level of the Box of the Great Old Ones could turn the target's location into toys and switch locations with its interior. Botis had used this trait to easily achieve his goal. The second level of the Box of the Great Old Ones recorded different locations. Once it was released, the holder and the living beings within its effective range would head directly to the corresponding region. They would then wander around the cosmos like the angel from the Abraham family back then, exploring the universe. As for what was on the third level of the Box of the Great Old Ones, Botis knew about it but didn't dare to think about it. It was just like how he usually didn't dare come into contact with this Grade 0 sealed artifact, smack. After closing the lid of the Box of the Great Old Ones, he grabbed the mirror that was embedded in the transparent vortex that was suspended in midair with his right hand. Once a certain area was concealed, a secret sorcerer had to use the corresponding door or directly remove the concealment to exit. Botis had chosen the latter method because it was the easiest and fastest method. The shadows stirred, and the area that disappeared returned to the real world. The room was finally complete. Botis didn't stay any longer. Without even looking at his surroundings, he made his body rapidly fade away. He held the many-gemmed silver-black box of the Great Old Ones as the colors saturated and overlapped with each other. He traversed the spirit world, which was filled with strange creatures, towards his designated location. In a few seconds, he walked out of the void, attempting to enter the ruins of the Battle of the Gods by crossing the huge chasm that split the seas. At this moment, the Botis stopped in midair. His eyes narrowed, and his eyes instantly turned dark, dotted with countless points of resplendence. It was like the cosmos had been reflected in his eyes. The gravel formed by the stars spun rapidly, causing the cracks at the bottom of the sea to rapidly turn incorporeal, causing everything in front of him to shrink and condense into a wavering orange flame. This flame extended from the tip of a matchstick as it was extinguished. Everything that Botis had experienced after removing the concealed space was an illusion. He remained rooted to the ground. And the source of this illusion was the burning matchstick. The matchstick was held by a fair-skinned palm, and the owner of the hand was a woman wearing a purple-patterned black robe and a hood. She was sitting on a carriage that was halfway through the wall, formed from a gigantic pumpkin. Pulling the carriage were a bunch of gray rats. This was none other than Catalea, but her appearance, image, and bearing had changed. This was the power she gained from the magic of Cinderella. The core Beyonder power of the Mystery Prior Pathways Sequence 4 Mysticologist was called Mystical Reenactment, fully expressing the saying, "Knowledge is power." To put it simply, a mysticologist could draw power from different mysticism, knowledge they grasped, and create all sorts of magic or witchcraft. As for the corresponding mysticism knowledge, the less that was known by others and the less it spread, the more powerful the spells became. The contrary could also be established. Once some knowledge and legends were known to many and no longer mysterious, the magic or witchcraft created by drawing on its powers would become almost ineffective. Catalea had no idea why the queen could create all kinds of magical powers that were rich in magical colors from the private fairy tales that Emperor Roselle had told her, but that didn't hinder her learning and usage of them. After all, she had heard of those fairy tales from Queen Mystic. The magic she had used it to temporarily transform and disguise herself was called Cinderella. The magic that threw Saint of Secrets Botus into an illusion was the little match girl. With that, she had used it to stop the other party from teleporting away, creating an opportunity for the battle that would follow. Just as Botus had extricated himself from the hallucination, the Cinderella who was sitting in the pumpkin carriage placed her foot on the ground and spread out her arms, causing a huge cross to appear behind her. As for Catalea, she seemed to be carrying an illusory object. In the empty room, candlelights lit up, one after another, illuminating a long table covered with flesh and blood. Around the long table were three extremely blurry figures, holding the globs of flesh as they constantly devoured the food. As if sensing something, the three figures turned their heads at the same time and looked at Botus. This Saint of Secrets' heart raced as he felt a chill rush out from deep within his soul. He then heard illusory gnawing, chewing, and digesting sounds. He could feel the undisguised malice and hunger. Botus's eyelid twitched. He hurriedly lowered his head and cast his gaze at the box of the great old ones in his hand. The silver-black box had opened itself without him realizing it at some point in time. The magic that Catalea used was called the Feast of Betrayal. It stemmed from the mysticism knowledge she learned of the ancient sun god's death from the Tarot Club. Its purpose was to temporarily awaken or imbue the target with intelligence, allowing them to commit a betrayal. Without a doubt, the effects of encountering a sealed artifact that was filled with malice towards the owner would be excellent. However, if not for the fact that she had obtained the protection of Mr. Fool at every gathering they monitored, Catalea wouldn't have dared to use this magic. Once the three main leads of the betrayal feast sensed it, she would definitely die for obscure reasons. She wouldn't be able to resist her death and would die an abnormally horrifying death. Therefore, mysticologists were definitely individuals with high risk. Their strength came from walking the edge of the abyss, coming from things they shouldn't have seen or heard. In comparison, Queen Mystic, who could create magic from her father's private fairy tales, was much safer than other mysticologists at the same tier.